Good morning. We're going to begin the program now. Please continue to serve yourselves, but turn your cell phones to silent mode, please. My name is Ben Dupuy. I'm a member of the BGR Board of Directors and chair of the Breakfast Briefing Committee. I'm pleased to welcome you to BGR's first breakfast briefing of 2024 at First Horizon Bank. I want to extend our gratitude to WWNO New Orleans Public Radio, which will rebroadcast this event on Tuesday, March 26th at 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. We also welcome those of you watching this event on our live stream. We hope you'll take advantage of the question and answer portion of today's program. It's easy to participate. Follow the instructions at your seats to access the online Q&A form. The QR code will also appear on the screen during the Q&A session. If you prefer to write your question, please hand it to a BGR staff member and include your name if you want to be identified. On the live stream, scroll down the page to type your question in the Q&A box. Following the program, please share your feedback about this event. There are survey forms at your seats that you can complete and give to us, or you can scan the QR code to take the survey on your phone. These surveys help us improve our breakfast briefings so they're as relevant and informative as possible. Later in the program, we'll show that code on the screen, or you may refer to the instructions. The best way to stay on top of all BGR events and research is to become a member. BGR is a private, nonprofit, independent research organization dedicated to informed policymaking and the effective use of public resources for the improvement of government in the New Orleans metropolitan area. We regularly engage with our members about our public policy work. BGR values this dialogue, and we appreciate our members' support in amplifying BGR's recommendations. If you're not currently a member, visit bgr.org and join the ranks of empowered citizens working to improve local government. We also encourage you to follow BGR on social media. And now, to introduce our topic this morning is Becky Mowbray, BGR's President and CEO.
Thank you, Ben. I'd like to recognize First Horizon Bank for its generous sponsorship of the BGR Breakfast Briefing Series again this year. Your support allows BGR to make these events free and available to the public. It is wonderful to see everyone this morning. Thank you so much for coming out to join us on this important topic. I am Becky Mowbray, and I serve as BGR's President and CEO. BGR's research reports identify solutions to some of the most complex challenges facing local government in Jefferson, Orleans, and St. Tammany parishes. Our work enhances local government accountability, and we help inform voters with independent, nonpartisan analysis of important local ballot propositions. Early this year, BGR released online property tax dashboards for Jefferson, Orleans, and St. Tammany parishes, which help residents to understand how their taxes are set and where this money goes. In February, we wrote a letter to Governor Jeff Landry urging him to keep Louisiana's Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority as a separate independent agency. And most recently, we've been using our extensive research on the Sewerage and Water Board to advocate for change in its flawed structure. And we'll be heading to the Governor's Task Force straight from this event. BGR's breakfast briefings advance our mission by allowing citizens to hear directly from government officials and experts on public policy issues vital to the greater New Orleans area. As Ben mentioned, this is our very first breakfast briefing of the year, and we will post a video replay of the event at bgr.org. Today's topic is one of high interest to our community. It is about New Orleans' strategy to address homelessness. The 2023 point-in-time count determined that the number of homeless people in New Orleans to be at 1,390, which is up 15% from the previous year. That year, New Orleans announced the creation of the Office of Homeless Services and Strategy. It provides support and connects people who are homeless to resources across the city. In recent months, this has included a strategy to reduce, quote, unsheltered homelessness in local encampments and move their occupants to permanent housing. The city has a goal of achieving low or no unsheltered homelessness by the end of 2025. As of mid-February, it had closed 2 encampments and housed 103 people. Public-private partnerships are an essential element of the city's strategy. The largest private partner is Unity New Orleans, which is administering a $15 million 3-year federal grant to reduce unsheltered homelessness. This grant will provide housing and support services. Meanwhile, news outlets report that healthcare providers, including Ochsner Health, LCMC Health, and the Tulane School of Medicine, among other partners, are contributing another $14 million for medical and mental health services for the newly housed people. Another challenge is the downtown low-barrier homeless shelter, which has 40% of the shelter beds citywide for individual adults. The city assumed operations after its previous nonprofit operator informed the city that it wouldn't renew its contract that expired on December 31st. As the city seeks a new operator, conditions at the shelter have deteriorated. Here today to share their insights on these and other challenges are Lesli Harris, New Orleans City Councilmember for District B, Dr. Jennifer Avegno, Director of the New Orleans Health Department, and Nathaniel Fields, Director of the Office of Homeless Services and Strategy. Councilmember Lesli Harris was first elected in December 2021 and is serving her very first term on the New Orleans City Council. Previously, Councilmember Harris served as Chief of Staff and Executive Counsel to Loyola University's president. Before joining Loyola, Councilmember Harris was the second Black woman named partner at the law firm of Stone Pigman Walter Whitman LLC, which I will note is a prominent supporter of BGR, and we are grateful for that. A native of rural Ohio, Councilmember Harris has degrees from Tulane Law School and New York University School of Law. Dr. Jennifer Avegno is a New Orleans native who received her MD from the LSU School of Medicine, New Orleans, and she also has a degree in sociology. She completed her residency at LSU Charity Hospital Emergency Medicine and joined the faculty at both LSU and Tulane shortly after graduation. As an academic faculty member, Dr. Avegno worked in medical education and established the Division of Social Emergency Medicine at LSU to facilitate innovative programming, interdisciplinary partnerships, and improve population health outcomes, as she continues to do today. In 2018, she was appointed the director of the health department for the city of New Orleans, where she led the city's public health response to the COVID-19 pandemic and other emergencies. Mr. Nathaniel Fields is Director of Homeless Services and Strategies for the Mayor's Office in New Orleans. Previously, he served as Vice President for Public Space Maintenance at the Downtown Partnership of Baltimore. Mr. Fields' professional background includes 20 years of experience providing outreach services to individuals and families experiencing homelessness, undergoing mental health treatment, and family strengthening training. He developed the first outreach team and citywide outreach strategies for the Mayor's Office of Human Services in Baltimore. Mr. Fields earned a bachelor's degree from Bowie State University, and he has a special passion for serving people who are experiencing homelessness due to his own experience successfully overcoming these same issues. We are honored that all of you are here today to discuss this important issue. At the conclusion of today's presentation, I will be moderating a Q&A session, and I'm sure there will be many questions after our speakers' thought-provoking presentations. As Ben mentioned, you can access the online Q&A form using the QR code that's in the instructions on your seats. We We want our audience to know that because BGR works on local government issues, we chose to give the public the chance to hear directly from city officials on this topic. Private partners are an essential part of reducing homelessness, and our decision to focus on government's role in no way diminishes that. The views expressed in this program are those of our speakers. BGR has no current position on any public policy initiatives that may be mentioned as part of this presentation. And one final note, BGR is a champion of constructive civil discourse for the betterment of society. We welcome tough questions and expect respectful interactions during the event. Now, please join me in welcoming all three of our distinguished speakers. Dr. Avegno, Mr. Fields, and Councilmember Harris, the breakfast briefing floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Becky. Thank you, BGR, for having us. I'm really honored to be with my friends and colleagues and to speak to all of you about a topic that I know is often top of mind for many in our community. And so we just want to run through a few brief things. Obviously, we could do a week-long seminar on homelessness, but I'm going to start by giving a little bit of context for our local challenges. And the reason I'm here is really primarily to talk about what are the health impacts, individual and community, of homelessness. And then Nate and Councilmember Harris are going to talk about our traditional approach and some new strategies, as well as the importance of public-private partnerships. So, as everybody knows in this room, the factors that drive homelessness are incredibly complex in one way, but simple in another. While it is true that many of those who are homeless, both unsheltered and in shelters, struggle with a variety of mental and physical ailments, particularly substance abuse and other mental health and addiction issues, they don't really seem to correlate with driving rates of homelessness. What does? The single largest factors in rates of homelessness are affordable housing, and I know Councilmember Harris is going to talk a lot about that. It's the housing market conditions. When rental rates go up, homelessness does too. The other related condition that we see associated with homelessness is income inequality. When there are stark divides between the haves and the have-nots in a community, that goes hand in hand with worsening rental rates and worsening rates of poverty. And I will tell you, based on our work in the Community Health Improvement Plan, we know that New Orleans has one of the highest rates of income inequality in the country. That is, the divide between those who have wealth and those who do not is starker here than it is in a lot of different places. And so it's really these structural factors in the housing market that have driven homelessness over the last several decades. Let's put New Orleans in context. I think all of us on this panel get a lot of emails from a lot of folks who might have the impression that New Orleans has the worst homelessness problem in America. While 1,300 plus individuals on the street is 1,300 too many, those of you who have traveled to other places know that this is not a uniquely New Orleans problem. This is a uniquely American problem. And when we look and compare ourselves to other cities, and these are just a handful of other cities that often we say, why can't you do it like X, right? When we look at the continuum of care, and understand this is HUD data, this is federal data, the New Orleans continuum of care is a region that encompasses both Orleans and Jefferson Parish. Most of the homeless, it's true, is concentrated in Orleans, but Jefferson Parish does make up a significant proportion. So when we're looking at that, it's both Orleans and Jefferson, and most of the other municipalities, it's their inner core plus surrounding areas. You see, we're largely average, 15 homeless individuals per 10,000 population. Anyone that's been to California in the last 20 or 30 years understands the magnitude of their problem is tremendous and far exceeds what we have. And if you just saw yesterday, they narrowly passed some legislation that's going to give $6 billion to address homelessness in California. I'm not sure that's going to be enough. So the point to be made here is our problem is fixable. It is manageable in New Orleans if we come together, if we do some things differently, and if we have broad support. What is a continuing challenge is the pace at which our rents have risen. And we can see that on this slide. If we look nationally, you can see as rents go up nationally and in New Orleans, so does homelessness. Our local spike of 15% higher from last year, from 2022 to 23, is similar to the national rise. But if you can look at those curves a little more closely, you'll see that our rents are rising faster than the average rents in the US. So getting a handle on our affordable housing and our housing market and the income inequality that drives it is critical for us to be able to manage this. So why am I up here? I'm the health director, right? Homelessness and health are inextricably linked. Housing is a major social determinant of health. When we look at the things that make people live to 90 or die at 50, housing and their housing environment is a critical determinant. Even being homeless for a short time decreases your life expectancy, even if it's for a month or 2 months or 6 months. You don't have to be on the streets for 10 years to die sooner than someone who has not. For those who are chronically homeless, their life expectancy can be as low as 50, which is 25 years less than the American average. So it is a real significant factor. And why is that? Because everything gets worse when you're homeless. Chronic conditions that affect so many Americans, like diabetes, heart disease, HIV, other mental illness, substance abuse, all of these are worsened when you have housing instability. If you don't have a place to call your own, and I see this every day in the emergency department, if you don't have a refrigerator and you're a diabetic, you will never be able to manage your diabetes. And you will be in and out of the hospital with worsening complications until you die. So it's a very sort of basic needs not being met that contributes to the early mortality. I can also say from 20 years as an emergency physician at the trauma center that the rates of traumatic injuries among the homeless population far outpace those in the general population. Again, when you are living under a bridge, when you have to rely on walking to get back and forth, when you are in stressful, violent situations, that significantly raises your risk of having a traumatic injury. And again, it's really hard to get to the doctor when you're worrying about where you're going to sleep and where your next meal is coming from. It's hard to get your medications, and it's hard to stay healthy. Oops, sorry, I think we missed a slide. There's a slide that I think missed in here, but it's not just if you want to look at the pure illness of an individual and how that's affected by homelessness, but it's also the cost. The average cost for someone who is homeless to public systems, and a major driver of that is healthcare systems, is tens of thousands of dollars a year, up to $40,000 a year, simply average emergency department and hospitalization costs. And we know hospitalization costs are longer for individuals who are unhoused because it's very difficult to discharge them back to the street. So we are all paying significantly for the cost of to keep someone homeless, when the cost to house them is a much better return on investment. I'm talking about homelessness broadly, but one thing we're going to talk about, and I'm going to hand it over to Nate in a second, is the particular health hazards of encampments. Encampments are sort of recent phenomena in American homelessness in the last decade or two. And across the country, you've seen them explode in cities. As difficult as it is, and as difficult on an individual's health to be simply homeless, encampments create unique public health hazards, not just for the individuals who live in them, but for the community at large. What we've seen at the health department from 6 or 7 years of attempting to mitigate those public health hazards by cleaning, trying to stay within the law and the ordinance and our federal restrictions on what can and can't be done in encampments, is significantly higher rates of communicable diseases, GI bugs, respiratory illnesses, foodborne diseases, vectors such as rats and other animals spreading disease, motor vehicle injuries. As I mentioned, living under the interstate is a very dangerous place to live, assault and substance use. And when we really drilled down, when we were preparing for this sort of new strategy, this new parallel strategy of rapid housing from encampments, I analyzed the data on what are the EMS calls like to those encampments, and the numbers of overdoses, violent assaults, and deaths that were taking place in some of the encampments were mind-blowing, even for a veteran ER doctor. So this calls for a special approach. The process of getting folks housed using the traditional HUD definition of chronic homelessness and housing and going through our fantastic continuum of care partners is a slow and laborious one. And you can see that by the fact that it's very difficult to see progress on the streets. So what Nate's going to talk about right now is our parallel process that stems from the public health approach that no one should be living in conditions that we see in our encampments. Nate? Just got to press the green button to go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? So what I want you guys to think about is how we can extend that person's life, how we could actually take the resources that are at hand and actually be able to emphasize on how we can move persons from an encampment process into a housing process. All right, so what happened recently was amazing. Unity of Greater New Orleans applied for HUD funding, and the result was they were awarded. In that process, what it did was give us a new resource to the community that didn't exist before to be able to deal with street homelessness. In doing that, that allows us now to be able to operate quickly on individuals who are street homeless to move them into a housing process. Now, we sat down and we talked about what this could look like. In this, we could now work on moving persons from the street homelessness process into a housing process and make that number significantly low by 2025. What we are trying to do is now be outward facing and talk more about what this process looks like, so we are now having conversations with our community partners who are a part of the COCs. Now, I'm part of this process, but I don't call myself a leader because this is a community process. So I asked everybody in here to be a part of this process with us. And in doing so, when I asked Unity and I asked Travelers Aid to be our partners along with the health department and the other agencies who are here today to be in this process, they all said yes, because it makes sense for us to do what is right to be able to help those individuals who are the most vulnerable of our population. The initiative, Home for Good. It took us a while to come up with this idea. We thank our partners from United Way for being patient with us in this process, Ganoff and others who have definitely put in a lot of time and effort to make this come true. But our Councilwoman Lesli Harris and her office, who were a major piece in moving this initiative in the right direction, who just wanted to be a part of community and find a solution. When we sat down, we said, all right, what are the things that we want to do? Clutch Consulting Group was a group who works closely with myself and Taylor Dowes, who is my deputy director, said that, you know what, we think that if we take these resources and we braid these resources, we can actually help more than 420 individuals. We could actually help about 1,500 individuals who are currently experiencing street homelessness. So as we started to look at this, we said, what does that look like? 2023-24, targeted encampment decommissioning of the inner core. We're going to go underneath every single location, create what's called a by name list, and help those individuals on the by name list get connected to services. Why do we create a by name list? So that keeps us accountable to the individuals who are actually at the encampment during the time of us starting and ending our encampment process. That allows us to say we help these individuals who are the individuals who are originally at this location. What happens during this process is that people are going to come in who are new and say, hey, I've been here the entire time. We have on a list, and it's by name list, and it's dated and timed that we stop the by name list to make sure that we keep ourselves whole and don't overwork the outreach workers. I'm not boots on the ground, traditionally speaking, but because I want everybody to see I have my boot on, so Dr. Avegno is like, what are you doing? Go sit down. I don't want to hear it. And then I go to Councilwoman Harris's office and I'm like, hey, what are you doing? Go sit down. I'm going to tell Dr. Avegno. So I'm not boots on the ground, but I go visit a lot. Now, once we are working on this inner core piece and we actually get persons moving in the right direction, the next part is that also is talking about, as we're doing this, we're doing it co-autonomously, we are talking about coordinated housing navigation for all those unsheltered persons and sheltered persons. It's great to get the persons who are off the street. It's even more important to get the persons who are in the shelter process. If we're doing these things at the same time, we now create what's called system flow. And in doing system flow, we are not allowing the person to stay on the street for long periods of time. We are transitioning them into a segmented process where they are sitting there for this short time period as they're starting to transition. We do not want people out there longer than they need to be. If we can create a flow in the system, we can make that time period on the actual street shorter. They're still homeless, but at least they're not on the street. In 2023 and beyond, we want to accelerate the exits to homelessness from shelters. I want more resources going into that pot. Because if I could do so now, I went from a street encampment process to a diversion model. A diversion model is keeping a person from moving to the streets to begin with. But what does that look like? That means I'm advertising what the resources are. I pull partners to the table who tell me what the gaps are in the system. And now we start making ways for individuals to contact us directly so that they never have to go through a street homelessness process at all. Directed housing decommissioning. So when I first got here, I walked around and I talked to people in the encampments. Persons in the encampments always want to know who you are. So I just say, hey, I'm Nate. I work for the city. Immediately, people are like, oh my gosh, he works for the city. Don't talk to him, don't say anything. But what I had to let them know was, in order to help you, I need to know what the problems are. So I used to sit down in the encampments and talk to people for several hours, eating food with them, spend time with them, hang out with them. And guys came out at nighttime when we were playing cards and we were doing different activities, and they were like, why are you just hanging out at the encampment? I was like, how can I serve somebody who I don't know? I have to find out what the problems are. I had to think about what the solutions could be, but they have the answers. We can do with all these great ideas, but if we don't talk to the people who we're serving, then we will have no clue on how to proceed forward. I just came back from San Francisco, and a lot of the outreach workers pulled me up after one of my, I did a plenary at the end talking about my own experience. And they were like, well, now in the work, you're now in a suit and tie, you sit at a desk, how do you still stay in contact with the people? I said, I don't sit in a suit and tie, I'm not at a desk. I'm still in contact with the people. And on top of the fact that I'm now integrating myself and the services to the individuals that we're serving so they can actually access me. They don't get an office line, they get my cell phone number. I'm gonna say it again, they don't get an office line, they get my cell phone number. The persons in the encampments text me, they call me, they show up at my office, and I open them, I welcome them with open arms because they are people. The difference between they and you are they have no housing, that's it. They still love, they still feel, they still hurt. In this process of the decommissioning, I want to reestablish who they are and be able to allow them to truly live beyond their potential. Who owns that right? They do. Who can help them in that process? We can. So, closing the encampment site by site. Identifying the encampments is the first part of that process. Once we identify the encampment, my team goes in, they get a by name list. From that by name list, we now start talking about securing housing and housing units. We've been working very closely with United Way on helping us with landlords, and all of our business council partners have helped us in support with the Flex Fund. The Flex Fund is flexible spending that we use to be able to help the 15 million. 15 million can only be used on housing. That's it. But we still have everything else that the individual needs. They're gonna need furniture, they're gonna need move-in kits, which are gonna have all of their utensils, their kitchenware, their housing cleaning products, their brooms, their mops, the things that we typically don't think about will be in those move-in kits. Once we have gotten this person connected to services and moved into a unit, now we're gonna talk about the supportive services. The supportive services is everything else, mental health, addiction, case management, transportation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of the things that we take for granted day in and day out. Everybody in here, you've had a mobile transportation today to get here, whether that was walk, bike, run, car, Uber, et cetera, et cetera. But we often, when we see persons who are unhoused, they're like, well, they can get there to get everywhere else. It takes them 3 times as much effort to be able to get to a location than it does an average individual. So when we're talking about connecting them to services, if they can't get from point A to point B, we are doing them a disservice. So we get them connected to all these services up front. Now, after that is done, we go back to the encampment. That's when I step in, because there's this last piece, making the area clean and viable again, which means we have to activate the space. Usually, what does that look like? We are fixing the location up. If it's a private entity, we're talking to them about how they activate the location, whether that's gardening, whether that's construction, whether that's building out, whether that's just having events consistently happen in that location. Activating that space looks completely different for every different location. But that's something that me and my team and all of my partners have been working on, trying to teach individuals how to activate spaces. We just had a meeting last week about space activation, and we have a plan to move forward in that space for activation. Now, how does it differ from any other process? A lot of processes go with housing. Housing first model is one of those models that has been used universally. The difference is that we are doing housing first, but we're not doing housing only. We're doing all the other significant pieces that need to go in that process. The case management piece is really, really important in this process. In order for us to be successful, we have to have great case managers who have buy-in into what the process is. And the case management from Unity and Travelers, they have been amazing. They go above and beyond the call of duty. They show up day in and day out. Rain, sleet, or snow, they're on site. And we just wanted to give them a shout and say thank you for all of your hard work. We also want to talk about risk and need. In every location, there's going to be risk and need. There's going to have people who have high risk, and there's going to have people who have high need. We need to be able to put a process in place to make sure that we target those individuals as well. Somebody's going to be in an encampment with high mental health issues. We want to make sure that we have a process in place, and we have done so. MCIU goes with us out to the encampment decommissionings to make sure that they connect those individuals to services. We are also working with the health department and other partners to make sure that we are assisting those individuals with mental health. I want to tell you all of the good stuff that's coming up, but we got a lot of good processes that are on the table that we're working through. We just had a sustainability meeting with a lot of our providers who want to now be a part of this process. So as we are moving forward day by day, we're getting more and more resources to be able to make this more realistic and attainable. The other piece, consistent daily outreach. Now, what we have to do is not only do outreach in the encampments, we have to do outreach in the community. And in doing so, we have to be able to pull all of you to the table. It's not just about us doing the work, it's about you being able to participate in the process, because we can't do it alone. The city council, and everyone else who's a part of this process wants you at the table, but we need you to understand what we are dealing with and what we're facing. Landlord engagement. This is the hard one. So when we go out to do flex funds, we are actually asking for money so that we can use those for landlord engagement, incentivizing landlords to be a part of this process, holding households, even helping landlords to get their units up to par so we can move individuals in. Because we want the landlords to be a part of this as well, so we need to be good neighbors too. So if we can get the landlords to get on board with what we're trying to do and be able to bridge that gap, then we can be able to secure housing for the individuals that we're serving. And last piece, providing the basic needs. Like I said earlier, a person moves into a housing unit, that's great. But when we move them in with everything that they need. Bed, furniture, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever those needs are, we try to make sure that those persons are held whole. Now, this is the big piece. The encampment structure. It has our city leadership, everyone you see here and more, who are a part of that process. Project Lead is my deputy director, Mr. Taylor Dawes, who's here with us today. And Clutch Consulting Group, who works closely with Taylor to be able to go in to make sure that we do all these pieces. Outreach and navigation teams, Travelers Aid and Unity. They have been doing a fabulous job by name list, getting people connected to housing users and moving them quickly within this process. Unit acquisition team, is Unity and our team. Calling landlords, cold calls, and saying, hey, we want to build a rapport, we want to build a relationship. Do you want to be a part of this process? This is how we can help you. United Way has been helping us with that. Office is helping us with that as well. Thank you also to DDD, because DDD actually gave us one of our first lists of our landlords so that we can work off of. Housing and move-in team. Unity and Travelers Aid, OHSS, helps with the furniture piece. That means when we get a name that comes in, my deputy director makes a phone call, starts ordering move-in kits. Unity and Travelers Aid actually come in, grab the move-in kits, take the person and their items directly into housing. And Enclosure Maintenance Team, which is the health department, sanitation, law enforcement, private ownership, if there is some present, and also our council districts who help us to activate spaces. Here you can see Chapatulas. We shut this location down. We moved all those individuals into housing, and this took us a little bit of a process, but it was 32 regular stayers, 42 individuals were housed, and we had 4 outreach staff from Unity and Travelers Aid, 4 housing locators, and 5 case managers from Travelers Aid. We led with closure maintenance, of course, sanitation, health department, law enforcement, and others came to the table to help us out with that location. It was a unique plan because it went from public space to private. So I have to wrap up. I just got the wrap-up call. But I want you guys to see these locations, and what I wanted to get you to here, the Flex Fund was difference maker to all of these locations, all right? And I'm gonna move it forward for my councilwoman so she can get up here. And as you can see there, 103 her house. All right, I'm done. Thank you.
Well, it's always hard to go behind Dr. Avegno and Nate Fields because they are amazing champions for this cause. Dr. Avegno and I sort of came up with the plan to start the Office of Homeless Strategies and Services, or Services and Strategies, I always get it wrong, while at lunch together, and we found the amazing Nate Fields to take this position. What Nate won't tell you is that he is currently running our low barrier shelter. So I know there was a mention of the low barrier shelter in the preamble. I can tell you what they won't say. The low barrier shelter is a mess. It's a mess. There are rats, the elevators don't work, it's not clean, security is a mess. Odyssey House has answered an RFP and has proposed, I think, $6.5 million to run the shelter per year. Currently, it houses about 350 people. Odyssey House says if they don't get an additional $1 million, that they will have to reduce that number to 250 people. So that means another 100 people on the street. What I'm trying to do, and what Allison, my chief of staff, is trying to do, is talk the mayor's office into funding the additional $1 million so that Nate can get back on the ground doing closure maintenance and all of the good things that he does so that Odyssey House can support the low barrier shelter. What I am also trying to do is encourage you all today, and you all are leaders in our community, to support what we are calling the Housing Trust Fund. And let me see where we are. Go back. All right. The Housing Trust Fund so far has been established by the City Council. And in the 3 years that I've been on council, we have allocated $49 million. What that $49 million does is to go in to close gap financing for affordable housing complexes, provide emergency shelter. But what I want to do is establish this as a long-term thing in the city of New Orleans. And so what I'm asking for is a charter amendment to our charter whereby 2% of our budget goes into a housing trust fund to permanently support the housing trust fund. This is not new tax money. What it is money that's currently in our budget year after year, and 2% would go into this housing trust fund, again, to support gap financing for projects that support affordable housing, that support home ownership, and that support flex funds to get people into housing that they need. So this will be on the ballot in November, and again, as leaders in our community, I hope that you tell your friends and family about it. The other thing that we've done is, as of February 22nd, we have established a process to update the city's zoning laws to expand the small multifamily affordable incentive for low housing developers. That means that a developer can build a fourplex, and at least one of those units must be affordable. So imagine a parcel uptown, and someone builds a fourplex, and at least one of those housing units is affordable housing. So again, this just incentivizes the building of new housing. I cannot say enough about Home for Good, and this really is a partnership between the city and our private and nonprofit partners. Gaddafi United Way is housing Home for Good, and whether or not you donate $1, $5, $65,000, as somebody in this room has done, you can participate in making sure that people who are newly housed go into a unit that is a blank box and have what they need: furniture, bedding, hygiene kits. So again, we'll put the link up for Home for Good. I know I'm not supposed to fundraise in here, but it's NewOrleansHomeForGood.org, and we are taking donations. And again, I really would love your support for this. I can't say enough about Nate Fields and his team, Taylor, my chief of staff, Allison, who really have been boots on the ground addressing the issue of homelessness. This is the first time New Orleans has had this partnership between the public, the private sector, and nonprofit sector, and I really hope that you all become part of it. So thank you.
Thank you again to our presenters, Councilmember Harris, Dr. Avegno, and Nathaniel Fields. That was great. In keeping with BGR's tradition, we have questions from the audience. To submit a question, use your phone to scan the QR code on the screen or the printed instructions. This will take you to the form at bgr.org/QA, where you can type your question and include your name if you want to be identified. Okay, so we've had a number of them that have come in during the presentation. We'll start with one about the goals. The goal of the Office of Homeless Services and Strategies is to house 1,500 people by the end of 2025. So far, 103 have been housed. How are you going to get there?
Well, it'll be a combination of not just housing the individuals from the encampment work, but because we only have a population of probably about 400 there on the streets. But we're also talking about the individuals who are in the shelter process. But also, we're also talking to that constituent who has fallen out of their current housing process and keeping them from getting to the street to begin with. And those are the individuals that we don't release numbers to yet. So as this process is going on, it won't just be one cell of us doing the encampment work. It'll be a combination of work that will be taking place to get us to the number of 1,500.
If I could just add that those first 100 were probably the hardest 100.
Okay.
Those were the most challenging encampments with the largest number of people with a lot of high need. And the team was learning this process as they went. So I think, is it fair to say, Nate, that the pace should pick up? Yeah.
Okay, great. Picking up with something that Nate had just mentioned, what are you doing to ensure the sustainability of the improvements that you make? And when you intervene and get people into housing, how are you going to ensure that they don't return to a state of homelessness?
So what we're doing is we're doing a sustainability model now, which means that we're reaching out to the providers to make sure that they can help us sustain. We need good case management. We need good mental health services, but we need them at the table. Not just saying it as a broad, but we need everybody to be a part of this braiding of resources. So we have been pulling all of the partnerships to the table, asking them, what can you do to help us sustain this model? These are the things that we need. Where do you fit in at? So just this week alone, I met with a few of the COC agencies who want to be a part of this process. I've also met with MHSD, who are wanting to be leaders in helping advocate for mental health and addiction services. And we're also talking about sitting down down with Hanno and having a real long conversation about what they can do to assist us. But we also are talking about employment development. We're also talking about mental health services, providers who are stepping in and going out into the field helping us. And we also have Odyssey House who are wanting to go into the encampments and work with those individuals as well as help us with our sheltering process.
We have several questions about Unity. What is the state of the city's partnership with Unity, and how do you respond to reports that Unity has requested that the city stop creating deadlines to close encampments?
I mean, what we have done is we've understood that we have to work this partnership. That's where we've gotten to. There are certain things that we have become really flexible on. The first two encampments taught us that we can't have a rigorous process. So we have massaged the relationship and we have built an understanding of how to move forward.
Okay. There have been reports that the $15 million grant has been slow to be spent. Is that true? And if so, why?
No. Unity has already started doing the work quite some time ago. They were given the green light months ago to start the work. They haven't stopped. Unity didn't take a pause because the $15 million didn't exist. They were already routing the money and getting partnerships to start spending the funds before they even hit the community. Unity thought this process through in detail. So when all of the community was allowed to start the process and they got the green light from Unity, they started housing immediately. So that right there is what people think, but that's not actually true.
The Governor's New Orleans Transition Council proposed directing the Louisiana Housing Corporation and the State Office of Community Development to assist the city with homelessness. What have you heard about this so far, and in what ways might additional state assistance be most effective?
Yeah, we were, several of us, including Allison and I, were really pleased to be asked to meet with some of the members of that transition team and to advise. And we're really pleased to see the governor and his team focusing on this. There's an awful lot that can be done, and Louisiana Housing Corporation is actually a really great example of a state agency that works very hard and is smart and provides a lot of incentives. So whether it's increasing the supply of affordable housing, whether it's increasing the incentives, there's a lot of talk nationwide, and we're working locally on office to residential conversions. Some of our downtown or other large buildings and across the state, layering on incentives similar to historic tax credits. But it's not just, there's not one fix, right? There is a fix that helps with fourplexes, then there's a fix that creates larger numbers of housing. And so the interest that the governor's team has shown in the variety of incentives they're considering is really encouraging.
Yeah, and let me just add on to that. I mean, I think that what we really have to focus on is the creation of more affordable housing, period. So as we talk about, for example, the River District, which will create 450 units of affordable housing, we need to support that. When we talk about incentives from the state to create more affordable housing, we really need to push on that. But we also need to push on additional funding for mental health services, for addiction services. So it's multifaceted, and anytime anybody emails me about what can I ask the state to do, I say ask for more funding for mental health services, because that's where we are really lacking, not only in New Orleans, but in the state of Louisiana.
Okay, terrific. We have several questions about the results of closing encampments. What are the outcomes from moving the Chapatoulas encampment, and with a new Treme encampment cropping up just blocks from the original closed site, what do you say to frustrated residents who feel like the problem is just moving around?
The problem isn't moving around. The problem is you have a person who found opportunity and they expound on that opportunity. It's not the fact that we're moving one location to the next. We have people who have gone to a new location in the Treme. All of those individuals who are over there are brand new to the area. And what we have to do is create a plan to be able to sustain. Right now, in my office alone, we have 5 individuals who are working on this day in and day out. We have Unity who's working on this day in and day out. We have Travelers Aid working on this day in and day out. But what we don't have is we don't have the housing to back it. And we're working on pushing that piece. But when I say housing, I'm not just talking about the physical location. We have to pay for utilities. Let me say that again. We have to pay for utilities because what we have to do is be able to have somebody with running water and electricity so they can stay within their unit. A lot of persons fall out of housing because they can't pay their electric bill, their water bill, their insurances. So we have to find other money outside of the HUD voucher to be able to sustain that. So when we don't have those processes in place, this individual who is on the street is going to find new locations to go to. And every single day, listen, every single day, there's a new person falling into homelessness. They lost that check last week. They don't know what the sources are. They're afraid to go into a shelter process. They grab a tent and go where they see people underneath bridges. We have to get in front of that process. We have to be able to have funding to do so. It doesn't exist currently. So we are chasing our tails at the moment because of the fact that there's funding that doesn't exist for the locations that we need. In order to us to move forward, we need all of the community help. We've been getting the large donors from the Business Council. We need private dollars too. A regular citizen who wants to do good, I don't want you taking food to the encampment. Send the money to United Way and Ganoff, and we can use that money to house the person and house them permanently.
As New Orleans gets better at dealing with homelessness issues, are you concerned that there will be more people who migrate to New Orleans to get services?
Well, it's a concept that a lot of cities face right now. I was just sitting in, like I said again earlier, San Francisco, and a lot of people who had the same exact sentiment. But every single city that we're working with is doing the same exact thing at high rate. San Francisco has started their process, Los Angeles started their process, and a lot of other cities around the country are doing the same exact thing, and they always get this same question. The answer to that question is that people are falling into homelessness. Now, what I got when I first got here was get the people from underneath the bridge. I'm not going to throw people away. What I'm going to do is successfully transition them into housing with the hopes that they'll stay there and hopefully build a process so we can keep that from happening. Are people coming here from other cities? Yes. Are people being transient and going from location to location? Absolutely. But that is not a common concept that let's go to New Orleans because they're fixing homelessness. That's a thought and an idea that some people have, but that's not the reality.
Well, and let me add this too. I mean, and I've seen you in action at the encampments, and there are people who get off a bus, come to New Orleans, and have no place to go. And what I've seen Nate do, what I've seen Grace at the Green Light do, is problem solve, which means getting them a ticket back home, getting them on the train to go back to relatives who can care for them. So sometimes they might end up under the bridge or in an encampment for a week, but then they go find services and we get them back home. It's a gas card, for example. We had a family who came down, a woman lost her job here in New Orleans. Allison found them a gas card so they could fuel their truck to get back to where they came from. So when we talk about these flex fund dollars, we're not talking about just moving kits, just incentives for landlords. We're talking about things as simple as gas cards, as bus tickets to get people back to where they have the support that they need.
Okay. Are you finding enough landlords willing to house the homeless? And what challenges are you facing getting landlords to join the program?
Landlords have been hurt before here in New Orleans. They have been forgotten about during COVID. They had issues with getting repayment. They had issues with relationships between city and private partners. So they have gotten some hurts along the way. We are trying to build up rapport with landlords. We're asking landlords back to the table to address some of those issues. And landlords have given us a lot of information of why they turned away to begin with. So what we're trying to do is make sure we hold those landlords whole. We make sure we get them funding that they need to be able to move individuals in and make sure they can fix their property up. If they have some insecurities about this process, we bring them in the process and show them exactly what we're trying to do. We haven't won a landlord war yet, but we are asking every single day that they come to the table to help us in this process. Once we can get a good basis of landlords who are trustworthy and work with us in this process, we can move forward a lot quicker and we can see people off the streets faster, which will help us actually work on a diversion model versus us chasing our tail.
And I would say this, at least once a week, we get an email from somebody who is a good landlord who says, I want to be part of the process. So as word is spreading that we're looking for landlords, and please spread the word, again, you guys are leaders in the community. If you know of a landlord who would be willing to house folks, reach out to Nate and Taylor. You can email me and Allison, and we will get those landlords connected so that they can house people. Because there are willing landlords out there who are willing to take vouchers, who are willing to take formerly homeless people, and we hear that good news probably once a week.
We have a question from Casa New Orleans. HUD guidelines have required that those receiving services are already street homeless. As we work with youth who have aged out of foster care and on the verge of street homelessness, I have been told that I need to drop a kid on the corner before they can access services. As we move to prevention and early intervention models, how will we identify and qualify those who are doubled up and being put out without them having to be on the street first?
Do not drop people on the corners and leave them. There are multiple ways to access housing and housing resources. They don't have to be chronic. When a person is chronic, they are street homeless for a 12-month period. Do not believe in that, folks. There are other resources and other ways to be able to help individuals stay from off the street, especially youth and young adults. We have to make sure that people know what the resources are. We had our first sustainability modeling plan. If you need to be a part of that process so you can know where all the resources lie at, please see me when I get finished the meeting so I can make sure you have the information. But please do not drop youth off on corners thinking that that's the way we're going to assist them and help them get into housing and housing processes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. Is there a long-term plan for ensuring that there's sustained private investment in the Home for Good program and in our housing system overall?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that you all vote for the charter amendment when it comes up in November. Again, 2% of the city's budget will go to a housing trust fund that will support establishment of affordable housing, building resources for affordable home ownership, rental assistance, and again, fixing up properties that are falling into blight. So again, 2% of the city's budget, think about that. That's about $20 million a year into a housing trust fund, and the city council has already put $49 million into it. So I think that's a way to sustain and maintain the affordable housing ecosystem in New Orleans.
Well, but I will say there will never not be a need for private assistance. When you look at the sum total of what we're trying to do, both with the HUD money and with the encampment decommissioning work, 95% of the tab for that is from government sources, city and federal. 5% is what we're asking for private dollars. That's a great return on investment for your money, for your private money. In other cities where and there's only a handful that have done the encampment decommissioning model, Houston, Dallas, and Oklahoma City is doing it at the same time we are. 100% of the flex fund, the fund that gives the landlord incentives and keeps people in with move-in kits, has been from private sources. We're only asking 50% right now from private sources. So I think if we want to be able to compete with other cities that are doing this well, the city should have large skin in the game, but we are always going to need private assistance.
Okay. What are the biggest barriers to system flow, meaning decampment, rehousing, and activation right now? And what is needed to increase the system flow?
Great shelter partners. Like I said again, we just talked to our shelter partners earlier this week, talking to them about system flow and what issues they're coming in contact with. A lot of it is communication. The other pieces are, like I said earlier as well, utilities, moving an individual into a housing unit and having assistance with utilities. They get one voucher, and the voucher's cost does not include anything other than the voucher payment, which is the actual housing unit. So what these amazing case managers have been doing is asking landlords, hey, with this money, can you also include the utilities? Some landlords are like, great, we got it, we'll take it from here. Other landlords are like, how? They don't understand, they don't see it, they won't even take a chance at it. So we're trying to educate them and encourage them with our housing strategy to get those landlords to get on board. So the shelters are the key part of this process. When the shelters have flow, meaning that an individual comes in and their stay is the length of 45 to 60 days, that now has created flow. Our low barrier shelter, we have individuals who have been in there for 2 years. Yes. The usual shelter stay is a 6 to 12 month period. But right now, what we have to do is be able to create flow within that system to be able to move this thing along. Once the shelter is moving, we don't see encampments because now we have a place to send individuals to so they won't be on the street. Now you have system flow. How we get true system flow? Housing on the back end. And that's why the Flex Fund is so important to create this flow within the system, because we'll have housing processes and be able to navigate people quickly.
I am afraid that's all the time we have for questions, which is really painful because we have had 73 come in, and I think that might be a record. Thank you, Councilmember Harris, Dr. Avegno, and Nathaniel Fields for speaking with us today. Thanks again to First Horizon Bank for its generous sponsorship of this breakfast briefing, and thanks to all of you for making the time to come out and be with us today. Please remember to complete your survey. It helps us in planning these future events. You can use the QR code to take the survey on your phone or fill out the paper that's on your seat. A recording of today's BGR breakfast briefing will be available shortly on our website, bgr.org, and it will also be rebroadcast on WWNO New Orleans Public Radio on Tuesday, March 26th at 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. Thank you again to WWNO for that. We really appreciate it. We hope that this event has been informative and that we will see you again at future BGR breakfast briefing events. Watch for a new round of research reports in the coming months from us at BGR, and please follow us on social media. Thanks again, and have a great day.